So we're honored to have Sarah Zibin and Holly Atkinson. They're going to be talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion and operator initiative. I'm just going to briefly read their bios. Holly is an EOCP Level 3 water treatment operator and is the water treatment operations technical coordinator at Metro Vancouver Coquitlam's plant. She spends her free time chairing an advocacy committee at Metro Vancouver to empower women to achieve excellence and increase representation in STEM, which we all know as science, technology, trades, engineering, and math. And Sarah Zibin is chair of the BCWWA's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force and is also a member of WEF's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. She works as a project engineer in Metro Vancouver's Water Services O&M department. So please help me welcome the two of them for an exciting presentation. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the warm welcome. Today, Holly and I, as mentioned, are going to be talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And there's a lot of talks going on right now on this topics. And what we're going to be focusing on is what we called operator initiative. So how can you in the audience, you as an operator, somebody in the water industry, can get involved in this realm? So we just had the bit of a background about both Holly and myself as the speakers. And I just want to reinforce, so I'm a project engineer. I'm an engineer in operations and water services. And Holly is an operator. We're both in the water industry. We're technical people. We're not HR professionals. We're not in management. We don't have any special training related to diversity and inclusion. So we're speaking today from the perspective of your peers, of what can you do as a water industry professional. So before we dive into some of the details of what Holly and I have done, let's just get a bit of foundation here. So what is diversity? Just take a moment to think about it. I know you're probably thinking right away, gender is a category that you'll think of. Maybe race comes to mind, but there's so many different categories that are included. It can be a religious affiliation, sexual orientation, your gender identity or your gender expression. Physical or mental disability is another category. Indigenous status, your family status, pregnancy and breastfeeding are categories. Age is a big one in our industry, as well as race and color. And all of these categories in front of you are ones that are covered under the BC Human Rights Code, under the prohibited grounds. So all of these categories you can't discriminate against. They're protected legally. But diversity is even bigger than this. Especially in the water industry, we have even more categories. There could be the size of the community you come from. Are you coming from a small community or a large one, like the Lower Mainland? What region? Northern BC to the island, all the regions, you're bringing different diverse perspectives. Your education, your certifications that you have, or your experience, an area of expertise, and your skill set. All of that, when you come together, you're all bringing different diverse perspectives. So it's such a large range. And really what it comes down to is this is not completely inclusive. It's just the similarities and differences that we have through our experiences and our attributes. So I'm sure all of you in the audience are thinking of probably many more that aren't even covered on this slide because it's such a broad range. So do you think that our industry is diverse from your own personal experiences and what you've encountered? Maybe take a moment to think about your own workplace, what you've experienced. You may be fortunate enough to come from a very diverse workplace, or there may be some of you in the audience who right away, quick answer, nope, we're not diverse. So before we get into the personal stories, I want to give you a few facts. I'm going to reference some of the key published studies on our water industry. So the first one being a 2016 Brookings report, and it was done on the US water workforce. So it's just a way to compare, and it was a pretty robust study and had some interesting information. There's also the 2015 BC water and wastewater sector workforce profile, which was done by EOCP and BCWWA as well as other partners. And I'll fill in the gap with some more recent BCWWA 2018 member survey and just compare everything to Statistics Canada's 2016 census data. Okay, so let's get into it. Are we diverse? Well, when we look at gender, the water industry can range, different studies have different results, range from 91 to 85% male. So you can see it is very male dominated. And the reason why you're seeing that range there between 85 and 91% is these different studies, they had different subject groups. So the Brookings study has the lower range, 85% male, and they included professions that are really female dominated. So ones like billing clerks and administrative assistants, those roles can range from like 95 to 90% female. So the gender discrepancy does not just go in one direction. But when we look at, say, operators in BC, it's 94% male. And when you look even closer at, say, the supervisors of these operations, so foremen, supervisors, superintendents, that's up to 99% male. So we only have about, I think the number was 0.4% female supervisors in BC from the study in 2015. So Holly here, when she speaks, she's in that 0.4%. And then there's other professions such as, say, pipe layers in the US are 99% male. So I think it varies from occupation to occupation, but we definitely have some room to grow when it comes to gender. And water workers, they tend to be older. In BC, 77% of workers are over the age of 35. And when you compare that to Statistics Canada's information in the same year, the overall labor force was about 71% over 35. So you can see that we have a larger percentage, and we have about 36% of our workforce over 50. So what that tells you is that we're going to have a need for newer workers in the coming years with retirements. In the US, they did find that their water workers had a median age really similar to the national median. So the water workforce was at 42.8, and the national median was at 42.2 years. So there's not a huge difference there, but it's all in the details. You have to look at the specific occupations. So some occupations are older. Water treatment operators, they are at 46.4. And then machinists are at 48.3. So looking at those details there really helps to tell the story of what is our demographic of our workforce. And also water workers, we tend to lack racial diversity. In the US, it's not too stark when you look at the overall, so nearly 2/3 of the water workforce is white, similar to all occupations and national standards. Yet, when you look closer and you look at Black and Asian workers, they make up only 11.5% of the workforce, compared to the national standard of 18%. And when you look at Hispanic workers, they're actually at 21.8%. When compared to the national standard of 16.7%, it's actually higher. And this came from the Brookings study. And what they found is that Hispanic workers were concentrating in certain areas, such as construction, whereas they have a lack of racial diversity in higher paying management roles, such as engineering and management. In BC, the 2018 BCWWA voluntary member survey found that 24% of its members identified as a visible minority. And when you compare to Statistics Canada information, our population in BC and the Yukon is at 31%, so you can see that difference there. Also in that same study, 4% of the members who completed the survey identified as Aboriginal or Indigenous, yet in the Statistics Canada, BC and Yukon population is about 6% Aboriginal identity. So you can see there is a bit of a discrepancy there, so we have some room to go. So why does this matter? Well, for myself, as a water professional, I look at our industry and the job opportunities available. And it's pretty fantastic. You know, we have great compensation, great benefits. A lot of professions, there's lower barriers for educational barriers for entry. And once you get into the field, you get to develop extensive knowledge and skills. there's great hours available, and you're getting to do something really positive and meaningful in your community. So for me, it just seems like there's such a missed opportunity there to not pull in more people. And from an employer's perspective, it really does matter. If you have a more diverse workforce and an environment that respects and embraces our differences, it's going to lead to more innovation in the workplace because you're going to have a larger range of perspectives. Also, we're going to be more representative of the communities we serve. So that's going to allow us to understand the needs of our communities and be more connected to what they need. And another huge one for employers is you're going to have the chance to pull from a larger pool of candidates. And that matters to employers. In the coming years, there's going to be a huge demand for new workers as we have recent retirements, and we're already at a shortage of skilled workers. So the workforce profile study in 2015 found that in BC by 2025, new hires in BC will be equivalent to 53% of our current total workforce. So we need a lot of new people in these coming years, and employers are taking notice. The EPCOR, City of Vancouver, City of Victoria, they've all been recognized as employer partners with the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion. And they're doing things like the City of Victoria, you read through their strategic plan, and right at the top of their values, they're identifying equity, diversity, and inclusion. The City of Vancouver has gone as far as to prepare an action plan on diversity and inclusion, and it includes things like going out and recruiting women for labor operations, so those fields where it's typically you have a bit of a gender discrepancy in those fields. They've modified their changing rooms, and they're putting out training sessions for their employees. So the employers get it. They understand that it's in their best interest to be encouraging equity, diversity, and inclusion. But that's not what Holly and I are here to talk to you about. We want to talk to you about from your perspective, from our perspective. And all of those stats, they're super interesting, but this topic to me it's more personal than that. It's what we go through on a daily basis, and we're hoping that by sharing our experiences and what we've done, we can show you what's possible. So by the end, you are not just thinking that you should do something, because I think that's up to you if you decide you want to do something. But more so, we're trying to communicate that you can do something. And before we get too far into it, I just want to acknowledge that both Holly and I are white females, so we are speaking from our own perspectives. And of course, our perspectives are going to be very rooted in gender. We're just one example of a story of what you can do. And I know there's probably so many other perspectives and stories out there. And at the end, I definitely welcome you if you want to share a small story through the questions, type it in. We would love to hear. So I'll now pass it off to Holly.
Thank you, Sarah. So yes, as mentioned, my name is Holly Atkinson. I currently am the Operations Technical Coordinator at Coquitlam Water Treatment Plant. Coquitlam is a very different type of water treatment plant. We not only are our own water treatment plant, but we also have work slightly distribution with rechlorinations throughout the Lower Mainland, and we also support our operations and distribution staff with disinfection of new mains as well as main breaks. In my current position, I work closely with our engineering departments. I do a lot of policy and planning. I also work closely with our corporate safety, developing confined space procedures, lockout procedures, standard operating procedures, scheduling staff and resources, contacting with vendors, and ultimately our resource scheduling. But the thing that I want to stress the most about this is I achieved this position, but like most of you, I started out in this industry as an operator in training in a small water treatment plant. So I began my career in Southern Ontario and a small systems community. At the time, I was the only female in my working group. So when I first started at our facilities, most of them didn't even have female change rooms, or if they did have designated female change rooms, everyone had been using them for storage, for additional change rooms. So it was quite eye-opening for me and several of my coworkers to all of a sudden have to be like, oh no, we now need to have separate areas. So my initial experience in water treatment was one of having to work harder than some of my male peers to prove it, that I could do the same job as them. And although I was never discriminated against personally, I did feel the need to prove to them my abilities. Even though for some I had just as much experience, just as much education, and for some I had even more education and experience than some of my coworkers. And I'd like to say that they recognized my abilities from the onset, but it did take a little bit of hard work on both our parts to really get to know each other and to realize each other's strengths and weaknesses. So why this was so difficult is water treatment in Ontario had been around for several years, fair bit longer than it has been here in BC. And most people who worked in utilities, worked at facilities, worked there because they knew people that worked there, or their uncle had worked there, their father or their brother. And that's how they got their job there. So most of the people that I worked with had known each other for quite a while, had developed these camaraderies between each other. But then among other things in Ontario, Walkerton happened, which, as all of you know, basically changed the face of the water treatment industry. Water treatment in Ontario expanded. They hired more operators. Certification became more important. Education, as well as experience, became a focal point for new hires. And people were hired more for their education, and I was one of those lucky candidates. So I entered a facility where most people knew each other previously outside of work. I was a young woman just entering her career, so what could I really know? But it turns out I had a lot to offer. I had the education, I had a very supportive, strong family background that taught me to, a father who was an electrician who taught me how to use tools and good work ethic. I lived in a rural community, so farm work, that's what you had to do. And because of this gave me a really good mechanical background in addition to my education that I had. So I had the skills and I had the knowledge. Now I just had to prove it to my peers. But I was very lucky as well because my peers and my supervisors, they recognized my work and they recognized my ability. They acknowledged where my strengths and my weaknesses were. And they worked with me to help improve myself, and I worked with them to help them improve themselves. And together we became a really good functioning group. Actually, we became such a good working group that when it came to hiring new operators, we actually did encourage more women candidates to apply, women that we knew personally who were going into the background. And we ultimately ended up adding another female to our work group. So that was I found that quite successful. However, after a couple of years, because it was a small system, I kind of had, to the best of my abilities, learned all that I could there. So from my experience in Ontario, I actually applied to Metro Vancouver, and I became the successful candidates to join the it was currently under construction, Seymour Capilano filtration plant. Coming to this environment was very, very different. Before it had been small systems, rural communities. Here I was entering a brand new city, which is a quite diverse city on its own. But we at Seymour, because it was a new plant, because there was new operations and water treatment was really starting to expand in BC, we had a lot of more newer and younger operators as well as experienced operators. And for the first time, I worked in a facility where we had more female operators, When I began, we had three of our female operators we had on staff, and one was in a foreman position. So they were in a position of authority. So for the first time, I was at a facility where we actually made up 25% of the workforce. You could start to see that change, and it really inspired you. And like as the project progressed, we added additional females to our group. The thing that really opened my eyes to what we can do in regards to diversity and stuff was this position at Seymour. We also had a supervisor and a superintendent who were both very cognitive of inclusion and diversity and wanted to bring it to the forefront. They encouraged all of us to further our education, and they welcomed all of our opinions and experiences, from our backgrounds to our work experience to the knowledge that we had. We were all quite different. So because we had a higher percentage, this allowed us to have, with Seymour, when we actually did go online, it allowed us to have a female per shift, which is amazing. I think at the time it gave us one of the highest percentages of female operators within the corporation. And as I said, at Seymour, I had some of the best encouragement to develop as an operator, to demonstrate my leadership skills, and to be exposed to all aspects of water treatment. Because the plant was in operation, we all had experience for design review, commissioning, and bringing the plant online, which we did in December prior to the 2010 Olympics. The other biggest thing that happened to me working at this plant was I actually became a mother as well. I had my son in 2011 and my daughter in 2012. And I had to really come back and examine, after I had them, what I wanted professionally and personally, how to succeed in my job and be a full-time worker and a full-time mother. So with having kids, shift work was no longer ideal for me. But I was fortunate enough that within Metro Vancouver, a position became available at the Coquitlam Water Treatment Plant, which is not a 24-hour facility. Although in the same corporation, going to Coquitlam was quite different. It was quite similar to the work group that I had in Ontario. The facility had been in operation longer, it had more experienced staff, but it was mostly comprised of male employees. At the time I was hired, I was the second woman in our group for operators. My first supervisor at Coquitlam, and this is where I want to show that it really depends on you and how you can help these people, and help corporation becoming more diverse. My first supervisor that I had at Coquitlam was not as open to furthering staff and education, and at times discouraged staff's personal developments. And I found that myself as a female, I had to then again start to prove myself that I could do the jobs and then do the skills. However, we quickly received a second supervisor, and he was the complete opposite. He was a great mentor to myself as well as all the staff. He could see our potentials, what strengths we all possessed, and he could bring them out of us. He encouraged our staff development and for us to take courses that would aid in our development. And in myself, he could see the leadership skills I possess, but I couldn't see. And I was given opportunities to plan and develop procedures and take the lead in small projects and gain that confidence, which is what I needed. And because of this mentorship that you can give to people, and not just myself, but others as well, he gave to all of us, and it's something that all of us can do to others. Our group, and the diversity within our group excelled. I became the first foreman and now the OTC. We began to get more and more female co-op students, and in turn I became a mentor to them. which helps with my leadership skills and helps them succeed and help them become a successful candidate for operations in Coquitlam. And it was such a good program that Coquitlam now has 50% female to male ratio, which I think is just amazing. And all this mentorship, in addition to becoming mother, made me want to do more to promote and develop women, not only in the field of operations, but all aspects of water treatment. And that is why late last year, I joined what was originally the INWED, which was International Women's in Engineering Day Committee, as a co-chair. And the vision, the co-chairs that we had this first year was we wanted to expand it from engineering to include all aspects of STEM. Metro Vancouver is an amazingly huge corporation that not only has operations, we have trades, we have engineering, we have math, we have science, and we have these amazing women in these positions that can help promote diversity and help promote and develop women within this industry. So what we've begun with this is we've tried, our main focus that we've done, which we're really proud of, is to expand it, is the little things. And these are little things that any employer can do, any employee within a corporation can do. One of the major ones that we did was we actually did a science-based holiday craft at our holiday kids Christmas party. And people think, oh, okay, it was just a craft, but it's a science craft. It engaged the young kids. It showed them how fun science could be, how fun engineering could be. We also, one of our main events that we did was to highlight managers within the corporation and for them to share their stories to others of how they were mentored and how they have been mentored in the past to help promote and develop their own career and skill set. So as Sarah mentioned, I have no special skill when it comes to diversity. I'm not HR educated. I have the same credentials as all of you, but all it takes is an interest, a wish to help those around me to achieve their goals, and to promote a world in which my son or daughter can grow up in, where it doesn't matter what you look like, but matters how you treat people and how you work, where the effort you put in is always rewarded. And all it takes is us. We can work together to create this change. And that's my story. So now I'm going to give it over to Sarah for her story.
Great. Thanks, Holly. So listening to Holly's beginnings, I'm hearing, okay, she had a father who was an electrician, so a mentor there, grew up on a farm, had these practical skills. So I did not come from a background like that. So when I graduated from engineering, I first thought, okay, I want to be a professor. I like teaching. I love learning. This will be a great fit for me. And that photo on the left there is me doing research in Nunavut on a wastewater stabilization pond. And when I got there, I learned, okay, it's not very team-based. This is not the environment for me. And that's when I applied to Metro Vancouver. And when I first applied to Metro Vancouver, I still had that mindset of these like traditional feminine skills of being more office-based. And it wasn't until I had some really key mentors that introduced me to more of the practical side of the water industry. And these mentors aren't strong females that look like me that are helping me realize I can do practical skills. These mentors they're old white men. Like in this photo here, it's the superintendent of construction. He had a very welcoming approach, said, you belong here, introducing me to the staff, showing me different construction techniques, and really made me believe that, okay, I can do this, and I do belong here. And it was the same with people in operators and operations. It's the small things that really made me think, okay, I don't have to work at a desk. I can work on more of the practical side of things. And I just really fell in love with operations. So now in my current role, I work as, I'm the engineer, the go-to person for a field operations crew of our transmission system. So if one of our mains has a leak or a repair is needed and it's a more complicated one and they need engineering support, I'm the go-to person that they go and contact. So it's really fun work. I'm getting to work in this collaborative environment. I'm often, well, the second on the scene. The first on the scene is the operators. I'm second there. And you're getting practical hands-on experience. And the work is so rewarding. You get immediate impact results from the positive work you're doing. And it was just fantastic. So I kind of like saw the light and went into more of this practical field. But I couldn't help but notice, especially being more, like Holly's been in the treatment world, you can see how many women are there. On this particular side, I'm very often the only female on the site, unless we have someone from treatment like Holly or somebody from our water quality staff. So that's what, I absolutely loved the role, and it started to get me thinking. I almost missed this opportunity, and there's so many other people that are also missing this opportunity, and I want to do something about this. So that's when I started to get involved in the equity, diversity, and inclusion realm. I volunteered as a member of the WEF Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, and that was just a fantastic experience. I was the only Canadian, and I had the chance to work with individuals from all across the United States with these really interesting backgrounds for about a year. And at the end, we provided recommendations to the board on how to encourage diversity and inclusion within the industry, over 50 recommendations. We established a diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittee within the Board of Trustees, so this will live on long term. Equity, diversity, and inclusion is not something, it's just like with yourself. It's not like, okay, I see a problem here, I'm gonna fix it and then I'm better. It doesn't really work that way. It's this continuous process. So being able to continually reflect and look at yourself is the same for individuals as it is for organizations. They're also going to hire a consultant to assess WIFE's current state and their current culture and advise on developing a strategic plan for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And most recently, they put out this Words on Water podcast series. So if anyone's interested, I highly recommend. It's just our peers, our colleagues, talking about diversity and inclusion in the water industry. I also, and this is one that's really near to my heart, volunteered as the chair for the BCWWA Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. And one of our first main tasks that we took on was preparing a code of conduct, which is really just the foundation. And a lot of it is just common sense. Like it goes through a definition of a diversity, like what I went through at the beginning. It then goes into like core values and inclusive behavior guidelines. And it's just really all it comes down to is be a good person. Like it's very positive and common sense. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you take a good look at it. And lastly, at the end, it has like an accountability and reporting. So just saying BCWWA has a zero tolerance for harassment, and if you ever see anything, this is who you report it to. We also carried on in the 2019 conference where we put that code of conduct, handed out to all the exhibitors. We had it posted throughout the conference. And like Holly said earlier, it's the little things I find that make the biggest difference. So it's as simple as we had this event that was called No One Left Behind event. So right at the beginning of the conference, everyone's invited. If you want to come grab some food or a drink, you're welcome to join. And we had a great turnout. There was an accessibility room for parents, so if you're breastfeeding or for prayer and meditation, that space is available. And we had a poster for updating. And now we're moving forward. We're still continuing to work on this. And I found through this past year and a half working on this topic, it becomes such a humbling experience where you realize you need to constantly be listening and reflecting, so that we're doing more of that. We want to hear back from BCWWA members. So there's going to be a survey coming out. At the 2020 conference, we're going to have a roundtable discussion, hoping to hear more perspectives from our members. And a lot of self-reflection from the board and committees. So it's really exciting, the work that we're doing. And when I joined it, it was never the thought in mind of like, oh, I know exactly how to be a chair of a task force like this. I have all the skills, I've done this before. It was totally new to me. And I just came in, like what Holly said earlier, you just have to have an interest and a drive to do something. So I volunteered just with my technical background for these initiatives. So we want to just leave you with a bit of a call to action. For yourselves, you don't have to feel like you've had a ton of experience to get involved. It can be the simple things, those everyday interactions in your workplace. Those mentors that Holly and I both mentioned, they are huge. So just reaching out to somebody and opening up to them, being humble, empathizing with their situation. Like the biggest thing you can do is just be available. Ask someone who's not normally in your network to go for coffee, or invite them out to a site visit, someone who's in the office, who isn't usually out and about. Show them around the site and make them feel welcome. Those small little interactions can go such a long way. So think about that in your workplace. Also, if you want to go bigger, I find we often will say, oh, well, my management, they're not making this a priority and this isn't something that matters to them. And I don't think we can just blame management or blame HR, these unknown people, that it's their fault. I think we need to take ownership ourselves. So if you want to start the conversation, do something like what Holly did, where she organized that Advocates for Women in STEM initiative and invited other women to join that conversation. You can be the one to take the initiative and start the conversation in your workplace. Or join an existing group. One thing I've learned through volunteering with WEF and BCWWA, and AWSTTEM does something similar, is there's a huge demand for operators' perspectives. So it's often only engineers at these who volunteer for this, and there's people want to hear your perspective. So definitely join. My contact information is below, and you can always reach out to me if you want an introduction or a connection. And lastly, it can be as simple as sharing your ideas and experiences. I don't think we're ever going to learn if we keep our information and our stories closed off. So whether that's sharing with your coworkers or even, I would love to hear your experiences and ideas. As I said before, it's constantly learning, it's listening, it's being humble and acknowledging that you don't know everything. So feel free to either call me or email me if you have an interesting idea of how to encourage equity, diversity, and inclusion in the water workforce. So I think that's all we have. If there's any questions at all, we'd like to open it up.
Okay, thanks so much, guys. That was a great presentation. So, got a couple of questions. The first one is around water and wastewater, or wastewater, I should say, collection systems. Mm-hmm. Why does it seem, the question is, I'll paraphrase, is it seems to be some issues around representation, inclusivity in that field within the overall field. In other words,
yeah,
the
little pockets, eh?
Yeah, I think what the author's saying is in his experience, he's seen good inclusion in and balance in water and wastewater facilities, but not in collection systems. Any thoughts on that?
I find that collection systems is quite like our distribution systems, where when it comes to utility and it comes to the field work, like speaking on a perspective, from my own perspective, it is a lot of hard work. It's a lot more physical strength. And I find that women, especially women at a younger age, are told they can't do that. Mm-hmm. So it never enters into their mind. And I think that's where the biggest issue is that as a whole, our industry does not go into the schools, like the high schools, at a young and to demonstrate that these career paths are open to you. And because of that, you've already closed off almost half your population right there. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's the biggest thing, is that like we need to open up the discussion, and we need to start demonstrating to people that they can do these jobs now. Yeah. Especially like historically, it was a lot more labor intensive, but as technology advances, like for example, like lifting manholes, like you now have magnetic manhole lifters. Yeah. You don't need a lot of physical strength to do that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that it's a perception that you need muscles, and that's the skill set that you need, but there's so much more to it, so just getting that word out there. Yeah. But I would agree, I've seen the same thing.
Thanks for volunteering ideas on how to volunteer. So it's a bit of a onomatopoeia. But anyway, just to make sure that we've answered that, the question was, do we have suggestions on where to start? I think you've adequately answered that, but I just wanted to throw it again in case there was something else you wanted to add for operators to get involved in this.
Yeah, there's, well, I can say from BCWWA, we've had the Task Force on Diversity and Inclusion, and in the coming years, we're going to have a community of practice. So it'll be much more open to a larger audience, so you can see that coming. If you know that that's something that you're keen on and that you want to get involved in, contact me. I can keep you in the loop when I see more opportunities, and I can connect you if you're interested. And I don't think you need to wait for this opportunity to be handed to you to see it out there. You can start something yourself as well. Anything to add, Holly?
No, I would just say the same thing. Like, you don't have to wait for a volunteer opportunity. I mean, there are lots of great opportunities with BCWA and WEF, but like, I'm a perfect example. When I wanted to get more involved in something that had always kind of been not for operators, and we kind of took it and made it for operators. And you can do that. You can do it yourself. All it does is take an interest. And I agree with Sarah. Like, if you want information on how to do that, would like my advice on stuff, you're more than welcome to email me as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. And one last question was, you've been talking gender in a binary session. What about fluidity and...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is definitely like another category of diversity, gender identity or gender expression. We shared our own personal experiences, so we're both cis white females, so of course we weren't speaking from that perspective, but it's an area that we need to have more of a conversation about. So I'm always would love to hear someone's perspective on that in the water industry, because I can't share it personally myself. But I agree, gender is not binary.
No, I agree. I think it's a area in which it should really be starting to be discussed in like trade, not just water, but like trades everywhere. And it's, as Sarah said, we gave our perspectives, and there's so much more to diversity out there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. We are at time, so we don't have time for any more questions. But again, on behalf of EOCP, thank you for your presentation. It was great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Great.